Hi everybody. So I have some new fan fictions to share with you guys this morning. The first one I wanted to share is the next chapter in my friend's story, the one with Emma's coming out. So in the first chapter of this story, Emma comes out as bisexual to Chandler and Monica when they're on the Paris vacation. And then after they get home from their trip, they go to confront Ross about his homophobia and how it impacted Ben. And then Emma comes out to Ross and they decide to go to therapy together. So in this next chapter, so the trip to Paris was in June. This chapter takes place at the beginning of August, before the chapter about Ben's wedding, where Erica calls Monica about her niece being the birth mother of Ben and Trevor's triplets. So let's begin. It had been a few months since Emma and Ross started going to family therapy together. Things were going very well. One night after Ross dropped Emma at home, Emma put the key in the door and saw Rachel at the stove cooking dinner. Daddy didn't want to come in and say hello to me? Rachel asked. Emma shook her head. No, Mom. I have a note for you from Dr. Weinberg, though. Rachel took the slip of paper from her daughter, looking very confused. She opened it gingerly. The note read, Rachel, Ross has requested that you, Chandler, and Monica be at the next appointment with Emma. Please call me back as soon as possible to schedule a time. Thank you, Dr. Weinberg. Rachel looked at her daughter. What's going on, honey? Is everything okay with you and Daddy? Emma shrugged. I honestly don't know, Mom. The only thing that comes to my mind is that maybe he wants to talk to all of us about the reason why he didn't want to help out with the child custody. I don't know why else he'd want Auntie Monica and Uncle Chandler at the appointment and not Carol and Ben. Maybe he has talked to them separately. Well, that would certainly be a relief after all this time, wouldn't it, sweetheart? Emma nodded. Yes, Mom, it sure would. Rachel kissed her daughter's head softly. I'll call Auntie Monica after dinner and see when she and Uncle Chandler are free. Grab a plate. Everything's ready. Okay, Mom. 2 weeks later, Rachel closed the boutique early due to the counseling appointment being at 3:30 p.m. Rachel was surprised to see Jack and Richard also pull in. Emma smiled at her grandfathers. Grandpa Jack, Grandpa Richard, what are you doing here? Jack Geller pulled his granddaughter into a tight hug. Auntie Monica called us. Richard and I are sort of confused about why she wanted us to be here. Rachel looked at her father-in-law. Jack, do you remember how I told you that Ross didn't want Emma to have a male nanny because you thought he was too sensitive? I do. Personally, I think it has a lot to do with that, and maybe that is part of why he did not accept Monica's adoption by Richard. Tears gathered at the edges of Emma's eyes. I hope we find out why Daddy has been so mean to me and Ben over the years. Richard squeezed his granddaughter's hand. Sweetheart, Grandpa Jack and I know how much you and your brother have been hurting. Hopefully today we'll find out the reason why your father has been so cruel to the two of you. Emma put her arm around her grandfather's. I love you too so much, she whispered. Jack kissed Emma gently on the top of her head. We love you too, honey. We'll get to the bottom of things today, I promise. Once everybody was settled in the counseling office, Dr. Weinberg cleared her throat. Welcome. As you know, Ross has called you here today to talk about why he has acted the way he has acted over the years. He has talked to Carol and Ben separately, which is why they are not here. Rachel cleared her throat. Why did you want to meet with us all together? As I'm sure you know, Rachel, Ben's last appointment with Ross did not go well. Was any decision made about the child custody? Ross stared at his ex-wife. Yes, the child custody agreement that was put in place with Chandler and Monica in 2014 is still in place. The restrictions are not being lifted. Jack Geller looked at his son. Why did your sister call Richard and I here today, Ross? Ross sighed. My behavior over the years has impacted my relationship with everybody in this family. I have finally taken accountability for my actions. Monica let out a relieved sigh. Thank God, Ross. I think this makes everybody relieved and happy. So, you're not going to have any kind of relationship with Ben, Daddy? Emma asked. Ross looked sadly at his daughter. No. honey. Ben does not want me in his life at all. I have bought this on myself, and I totally regret my past actions. Chandler looked around the room. So why did you call all of us here today, Ross? We are so confused. Ross cleared his throat to apologize. You all deserve to hear this as a group. I have hurt all of you greatly. I should have gone to counseling a long time ago after my marriage to Emily fell apart. Monica and Chandler nodded. We definitely agree with you, Ross, Monica whispered. So your behavior wasn't just because of your coworker eating your Thanksgiving sandwich? Chandler said, holding back a snicker. Ross shook his head. The sandwich was a small part of my breakdown, but not the whole cause. What else caused your breakdown, son? Jack Geller asked. Ross looked at his father as tears gathered at the corner of his eyes. The stress of trying to please you and Mom and be perfect all the time. I felt like a failure ever since my divorce from Carol. Monica's jaw dropped. You never told me this, Ross. How come? I was too embarrassed, Ross whispered. Monica walked over to her brother and wrapped him in a hug. Oh, honey, I wish you told me. I could have helped you through this. I have gone through the same thing for a long time. That's why I was overweight for so many years. Daddy, why did you have so much trouble accepting Ben's sexuality? I am worried that this might impact our relationship too, Emma asked. I wanted to achieve perfection in all aspects of my life, including my children. That's why I didn't want Ben to play with a Barbie. Jack Geller cleared his throat and looked at his granddaughter. Your grandmother and I are partly to blame too. When your dad got divorced from Carol, we resented her for cheating on him with Susan for a long time. It took Ben revealing he was gay for us to change our behavior. We didn't want to lose our relationship with our grandson because we were so close-minded for such a long time. Emma looked at her grandfather. You accepted my sexuality, though, right, Grandpa Jack? Jack kissed his granddaughter's forehead gently. Of course I do, honey. Who you love doesn't matter to me as long as you are happy. Do you think Grandma Judy would, too? Jack shrugged. I have no clue, Emma. I have not spoken to her since we divorced. I don't plan to talk to her again because of how she manipulated Grandpa Richard and I for so many years because she was embarrassed by her affair. Emma looked at Rachel. Are you going to change the child custody against Daddy, Mom? I mean, technically you are an adult, honey. You can make your own decision. Have you and Daddy been discussing this in your one-on-one sessions? Ross looked at his ex-wife. I owe you so much back pay for child custody, Rachel, from all that time you were in Paris by yourselves. I will pay you back as soon as I can. Why didn't you ever come to Paris to visit Daddy? Uncle Chandler, Auntie Monica, Jack, and Erica always did. Ross let out a sigh. I really don't know, honey. I really regret that and know how much it has hurt you. We really resent you for this, Daddy, don't we, Mom? Emma asked. Tears gathered at the edges of Rachel's eyes. Yes, we do, honey. Do you want to have a relationship with Daddy, Em? Emma's eyes met Ross's. Daddy, if you're not going to change your mind about disowning Ben, where does our relationship stand? Are we ever going to have one at all? Do you want to? Ross whispered. Emma looked around the room and her eyes met with Chandler. She did not reply to her father right away. Princess, your father is asking you a question, Chandler whispered. You've been more like a father to me than Daddy ever has, Uncle Chandler, and I think that you know that. Chandler stood up and walked over to his goddaughter and wrapped his arms around her. My girl, you know your dad will always love you no matter what. Emma finally looked at Ross. Do you accept my sexuality, Daddy, yes or no? Ross looked at the floor. Bro, Ross, what do you have to say for yourself? Will you accept our daughter for who she is? Rachel asked. I think our relationship goes deeper than that, Rachel, and you know it, Ross said bitterly. Monica's eyes immediately met with Rachel's and then Emma's. Ross, your homophobia has impacted your relationship with Ben. As you can see, it has impacted your relationship with Emma too, his sister whispered. Yes, I realize that, Monica. I've been aware of this for a long time. So what's your answer to your daughter's question, Ross? Dr. Weinberg asked. Ross's eyes finally connected with Emma's. My sweet Emma, I will always love you no matter what. Always realize that. I love you too, Daddy, Emma whispered. Ross let out a huge sigh. After what has happened to Ben and how he has reacted to being disowned, I really don't think I feel comfortable enough with your sexuality to be able to accept it. I'm really sorry, sweetheart. Emma burst into tears. It's okay, my girl. Let those tears flow. Chandler whispered, pulling Emma into his arms. I love you so much, Uncle Chandler, Emma whispered. Baby girl, I love you too, always. Screw you, Ross, I hate you, Rachel hissed. Do you still want the child custody money? Ross asked. Richard and Jack exchanged a look between each other. Richard then cleared his throat and spoke for the first time during the whole meeting. Send a check to me, Ross. I will make sure it gets deposited into Emma's bank account. Don't you worry. Ross nodded. Okay. Emma, do you want Uncle Chandler and Auntie Monica to take over Daddy's spot in a child custody agreement? Rachel asked. Emma nodded. I wish they had done that 10 years ago, Mom. Trust me, they were always there for me when Daddy wasn't. We love you so much, honey, Monica whispered. I love you too, Auntie Monica. Emma kissed her godmother's cheek gently. So the next fan fiction chapter that I wanted to share is a revision of a story I started working on a while ago. It's called Reflections of a Mother's Love. So this is the epilogue chapter to my Annie fan fiction, The Daughter I Never Had, which talks about the relationship between Grace and Mrs. Pugh throughout all of the events of Annie and what happens after Oliver and Grace get married. And this was the part of a long-running fan fiction series that I started working on in 2012 when I first auditioned for Annie with the actor-singers to audition for Grace, because I figured it would be interesting to develop the relationship between Mrs. Pugh and Grace, and also develop the relationship between Annie and Molly and their cousins. So I will read on. I noticed this is from Grace's point of view, by the way. I noticed during dinner that my mother looked very pale and excused herself from the table and went to her room. I knocked on the door a few minutes later. Mama, are you all right? Mama shook her head. My doctor told me the symptoms of a heart attack at my recent appointment, and I am pretty sure that I am having one. What makes you say that? I am very nauseous and I am having chest pain. Do you need to go to the hospital? My mother nodded. Great idea, honey. I'll get my coat on. The hospital was not very far from the ski lodge. Once the doctor checked my mother out, she nodded at me. Mrs. Warbucks, your mother has certainly had a mild heart attack. She should stay here overnight for observation. I nodded. Okay, should I stay here with her? The doctor shook her head. We will call you first thing in the morning with any updates. What is your phone number? I wrote the hotel phone number and the extension to my room and drove back to the hotel in shock. Annie met me at the door to our hotel room. What's wrong with Grandma Helen, Mom? I was shaking as I took off my shirt. She had a mild heart attack, darling. Is she okay? I don't know, Annie. She is staying overnight for observation. The doctor is going to call me back first thing in the morning with updates. The phone rang first thing in the morning. It was my mother's nurse. Good morning, Mrs. Warbucks. What did you have for dinner last night? I was shocked by this question. Steak and potatoes with green beans. The heart attack that your mother had was caused by chest pain due to indigestion. Is she going to be all right? She had another mild heart attack overnight, and I don't think she's going to recover. She is 85 after all. Your family should come down as soon as possible to say goodbye. My heart fell to the pit of my stomach. Thanks for calling. We'll be there shortly. Oliver rolled over. Was that your mother's doctor, sweetheart? I nodded. My mother had another heart attack last night. The nurse said she's not going to recover. I'm going to get dressed and wake up Molly, Annie, and Joanne. I will call from the hospital for the rest of you to come in the hour. Oliver reached out and touched my arm. Honey, listen to me. We should all go together, don't you think? I nodded. Absolutely. Oliver rose from his side of the bed. Let's get going. Time's a wasting. When we were at the hospital 5 minutes later, which room is Helen Pugh in, please? Oliver asked. End of the hall, on the left, room 134, the receptionist replied. I'll stay here and call everybody else to come, and you take the girls down to Mama's room, I told my husband. Oliver nodded solemnly. Okay. Our family circulated in and out of Mama's room. She passed away at 9:40 a.m. We drove back to the ski chalet in silence. When we arrived back, I felt my niece Catherine put her arm around me. Hey, Aunt Grace, how are you doing? She whispered, hanging in there. Catherine's eyes met mine. I think it's really important to honor Mrs. Pugh and Annie and Molly's ceremony, Aunt Grace. I kissed my goddaughter's head gently. Thank you, honey. That means a lot to me. What should we do? I paused for a moment. She left me a cookbook of her favorite recipes. I like to cook them during the family reunion. Can I bake something for the reception? I smiled. That would be great. What was her favorite color? Teal. Would you like to incorporate that into the flowers or your outfits? Catherine nodded. I think that Annie and Molly would really like that. Catherine Grace, I love you to the moon and back, sweetheart, I whispered. Catherine fell into my embrace. I love you too, Aunt Grace. So, I would like everybody's feedback on these fan fictions, please. I know that my friends' content is not really popular, but I would really appreciate especially how I interpreted Ross's breakdown in the one with Ross's sandwich, because I feel like in that episode, Ross going to therapy was really glossed over for the sake of time constraints in the episode. And I don't think it was really treated with the respect it deserved. And I also think that Ross and Rachel should have probably gone to marriage counseling. That's just my opinion. I'm not sure if it's popular or unpopular. And then as far as the Annie story goes, this is my first revision of this chapter. My writing group at Panera that I go to is very helpful in giving me advice on this, but I am looking for further feedback on it. So if you could give me feedback, that would be great. Have a great weekend.